it's not got no gas in it.
Real quick, David, you had mentioned the community gardens. I did have a chance to speak to a couple folks that are involved with community gardens. For instance, there's one on the corner of 4th and Castle called Avery. They have had a compost there at the site, and they are kind of in the middle of a neighborhood. They've had some challenges in the past because it was really more of an education factor. People were just bringing anything and everything, chicken bones, things that didn't compost well. And for them, the biggest challenge was because it had a big mix of things and also close to homes, it was a rodent issue. So those were some of the challenges. They're very interested, you know, in doing something more again. They did take that one away for a while, but one of the other gardens, I think Willow, is using just composting with the plants that they have. I think they're all very interested, but the education piece is a big thing. They said the neighbors were super supportive when they initially opened it up, but again, probably the education piece was a factor.
And I think I would think that the co-op would probably, the co-op extension would probably be willing to help with that because they have, like, they put on composting classes. So I would imagine we'd be able to arrange for them to like have a local session there. Garden or something like that. Or help us put together like just like a little white, like 1-page sign or something on for their compost areas to say like what can and can't.
Yeah, they were very helpful when we did the backyard bin composting with handouts. They offered to help do any training sessions. So I'm sure, yeah, good to reach out to you again. But yeah, just wanted to have Ron here as well, just representing our Parks Department. Just mentioned previous experience up there.
Yeah. I came from Greensboro to Wilmington just a couple of years ago, and my role in Greensboro was the Parks Rec Department as well. And we had a pretty robust community garden program. There were 5 or 6 rec centers that had gardens out back, and those were typically managed by single groups. It might be a neighborhood group, it could be an HOA, it could be just like a sorority or fraternity, something like that. And they would grow those gardens and use the vegetables that they grew there to give to the community in some form or fashion. But we also had, I can't remember now the number, it was more than 100 garden plots, and they were 8 by 12, something like that. And those were primarily concentrated in one park. I think we had about 80 in one park, and those were rented each year. I think they were $35 per year, so not insurmountable cost, but that way we had greenhouses there, we had tool sheds, we had water, we had tillers that people could use on site, a whole 9 yards for growing your garden, except for the dirt. It was just sort of a way for people to come and do the things that they couldn't do or were unable to do in their backyard in one location, with the support of a full-time community garden coordinator. That person also gave talks about compost and educational programs and taught the kids about growing vegetables, went to schools or had the schools come to that demonstration garden to show what was possible in a very small plot of land. But it was a pretty big program considering the size of Greensboro, about 3 times the size of Wilmington. And it was successful because just 2 years ago, I think they finished the addition of maybe 40 more garden plots in that one garden area. So it was a mix of both programmatic beds that were rented and then beds that were managed and free to others to use the produce as they saw fit. But it was lots of resources dedicated to it, but there was no way it was unsuccessful because in another of other parks, we had rented beds as well. There were 3 or 4 other sites that had maybe 8 or 12 beds in each of those parks. Those had water, they had fencing, they had tool sheds, they had sort of smaller version of what we had in the regional park. but those were just areas where people in the neighborhood could rent a bed or two and, or a pot or two in community garden beds. So I think it's doable. I think, like I was talking earlier, if we were able to pick one site, sort of build out from there, that might be the way to go. 24 or so beds to begin with a few resources and fencing. It would typically have to be in a staffed park, because you want sort of that presence there all the time. But you know, getting water to it, building beds are the first crucial steps, and after that, you can expand it as you see fit. But again, it's very successful program. You have lots of folks that read it year after year after year. Maybe would rent 3 or 4 beds in the same garden so that they could have succession of crops. And very accomplished gardeners. Most of them just didn't have a space to in their backyard. But you would be shocked at the amount of food that came out of those beds. And even the community garden beds that were at the rec centers that were managed by sort of an interest group, they would get hundreds of pounds of vegetables out of there every year. So I think it's a good program. It does require staffing and it does require space. There's just about no way you can start it without the resources up front. Sort of kickstart the program, but it is manageable.
They have any composting going on with those sites as well, or was it just
They did. The big garden that I mentioned at Keeley Park, if you look at Keeley Park in Greensboro, you can kind of see an aerial of the community garden area. The big garden there with the community garden coordinator, she would manage everything that went into the compost beds, so that we didn't have other kind of waste. Of course, being it was strictly vegetable gardening, you really didn't have any other animal issues or waste issues. You didn't have plastics or sweepings or anything like that. It was all something that was grown in the garden. So, and then, like I said earlier, they probably 2 years ago, maybe a year ago, they had a program where they came and demonstrated how you could compost in different ways. They had beds on the ground, they had tumblers, they had other things. So it was a full-time position that did a lot of that by herself. So
was it just one staff person from the city? And then
I think she was helped by a temporary or part-time person as well during the season. There was somebody on the rec side that did the community gardens for the recreation center, but I don't know that they've done away with that now because it maybe all be housed in park maintenance essentially. But there was at least one person who made it too. But she would do all the reservations for the beds. She would do all the, if the beds got out of hand and they had to be turned under, or she would do all the cleanup and stuff like that. She did a lot of education and a lot of growing as well. So in the 2 greenhouses they had, the greenhouse they had, they were able to grow some of the plant material that people were able to put in the gardens, especially for the gardens that were at rec centers where it wasn't residents putting their own money into it. They were trying to sort of serve this nonprofit function of getting the vegetables out into the community.
Do you know if, obviously other than the cost of the employee, like the rental costs for the beds, do you know if that covered like the kind of maintenance of the supplies and the utilities and stuff for the year? Or
Absolutely. It certainly does. I mean, $35 a year, have a little water on it, every week or so, a little bit of gas in a tiller. Didn't really supply any of the fertilizers or the chemicals that they may have been using. But there was a lot of upfront costs, a lot of capital costs for building those beds.
Right.
Once they, if you consider they were probably making 20-some thousand, maybe, well, 2,000, is that right? 3,000, about 5,000 in those beds. So it was certainly sustainable with utilities and other materials. Now, again, it was housed in a regional park, so it was just a function in a larger staff park with one staff person. It certainly wouldn't cover the staffing cost, but it did cover the infrastructure and maintenance cost.
There's that grant that comes from the state that's like a settlement from Smithfield, the environmental enhancement grant, and they set aside money each year and this where like encouraging people in cities are eligible, where it's either like land conservation or clean energy or water quality. And so this sounds like a perfect project where if you could identify even land that's not already a park, I bet you could get money for the capital costs and then maybe just ask the budget for the full-time staff person. But it's all about like taking land and making it not be able to be developed anymore. And then you compare it with like a community solar array, so it's just like an education area. But yeah, I mean, if we're worried about the budget or asking for something, that could be a good funding source. You can ask for up to like $5 million, I think.
So,
Yeah.
heard of that.
No.
Do we have any park or city-owned, parks or rec centers on the northern part of town where they had kind of the graduate students had identified like the food desert, the northern part of the city?
Maids Park is over there. Like that.
Robert Strange could be a good candidate. Big open spaces out there.
Are
There's
those,
sunlight,
are either of those park staff?
both of them. are.
What's that little park? It's like literally a quarter of an acre right in the middle, it's over by the water tower. Maybe 2 blocks off Dawson and maybe.
Oh, that's Tower Park. Is that Tower
Tower
Park?
Park?
Oh, there's basketball court there?
No, there's nothing there. It's like a yard with a fence around. I swear it's a city park.
Tower Park is,
But Tower Park,
Tower Park is right there at the water tower. So,
Yeah.
that would be,
okay, yeah, so
seems
that-
kind of great.
I don't know, did y'all do any like soil testing before you did this? Because I live on the north side and I can't grow anything because the soil is like really acidic from, I don't know what.
Well, the good thing is the beds that were built had good soil brought into them.
Oh, okay, you
So,
did, okay.
and so you started out with good soil, you don't have to change the soil.
Yeah.
back up. And the testing was left up to the renters each year if they want to do that.
Okay.
On plots, yeah, but could bring in good long soil
Mm-hmm.
to start with. And then, we had a few instances where beds would get destroyed, we had somebody run a car through some, so, and we just start back over. and
Yeah.
control that.
And the co-op does free soil testing as long as it's out of season. So that's something like if we were to build the beds in the fall or in
Like
the
advertise
winter,
that.
we could take samples and you can send that off and the co-op will do it for free. And tell you what the composition is.
Ron, how many existing community gardens are y'all involved with now?
0.
0? For the ones that are out there now, like,
Avery, Willow, and a few of the other ones.
they're not part of our, they don't get support from us.
No, they do not.
I believe all of them were started by David Brenner. I think he's the one who started all the ones that are still existing.
Who is he?
I don't think he's with an organization. He just started doing it. And the thing that made it, 2 things that I saw in what he did that was different than everyone else was a realistic view of how much it cost up front, which is like $25,000 to start a small community garden up front. But with that grant, that's small potatoes. And big potatoes. But then he also, he had like designated people, that said like, this is going to be mine. And they didn't charge anything, but like, they definitely had someone running it. It wasn't just like a passive sort of community garden. Like I just go out there and do the thing, so.
Well, the areas where we had 8 or 12 beds at a time, again, those were just, I think most of them had become raised beds over the years. And they were fenced off. They were not locked, but they were fenced. So you did have, on occasion, people going in there and getting materials out they shouldn't be. So that was.
I was wondering about that.
Use at your own risk, yeah. Yeah. It didn't happen as often as you think it could, but it did happen. And I think one time we had a garden set on fire, they burned the timbers up. But it's, you know, you can start out, the biggest hurdle really is getting water to these spaces because that's absolutely essential. And that's, you know, on the other side of, except for, you know, the fencing maybe might be a hurdle to complete, but the water's always a big one because it's several $1,000s out.
The community ones I know, they don't currently have fencing. And I think they have access to water, but she mentioned even volunteers, because all of these are completely volunteer apartments. Is a little bit of a challenge as well.
So, again, if I had a recommendation, I would say we would pick, if committee wanted to drive this initiative, I would say that you would pick one site that's staffed and build 8 or 10 beds and begin that way.
Yeah, start small.
Just start small and gauge the interest, but you're certainly gonna have to get a water tap up front if it does not exist. And build on a site that's staffed.
Do you guys have any idea what the temperature of city council is or something like this? Would there be support for funding?
I would say it'd be pretty warm. I think they would probably support it, up to a point.
Sure.
But I would say that the startup cost probably would not be unpalatable for city council. They were so inclined, and I would.
Depends on what happens in the number too. We might see. Swings in the radar.
Did they adopt? That's the policy, correct? They adopted it by resolution in 2015. I would imagine if we have 0 next to this, that's not a very good score. So anything that we could do to, they've already garnered some support behind this. Now, it sounds like maybe we need to change the direction slightly to give it a little bit more oomph, a little bit more push. But I think you're right. It's packaged properly, grant opportunities to support it. I mean, may not be that difficult.
One of the things we had talked about on the planning call was that this resolution, the verbiage kind of makes it sound like we will tolerate a community garden, not we will support a community garden.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's worth revisiting, like changing the verbiage on this. Probably not, since this is already an adopted resolution, but we could do a better job of publicizing, or to your point, if we start one community garden, it can kind of show that the city is more open to it. Because if you were a community member that said, you know, I would really like to, you know, I wonder how hard it would be to start a community garden. And then you read this, my take after reading this was like, well, I guess if I jump through all the hoops, I could do it, but like the city doesn't really seem like they want us to have this, you know, so that this kind of acts like a mild deterrent in my mind. Like, as far as if I were just a citizen reading this, I would be like, oh, okay.
Well, you asked earlier about city council's appetite for this, and it's clearly states that city involvement will be limited.
Right.
And that there'll be no out-of-pocket expense.
Right.
By the city. So
Exactly.
I think, when we talk about this will certainly have to be modified.
Yes.
We won't to assist us in any way.
Yeah, community gardens are unstaffed public facilities, you know, that kind of thing.
But these were, you know, talking about doing one on the city property somewhere, if, you know, if we could identify on city property somewhere, perhaps where Moorside, perhaps where one has already been. I thought Mates Park had some kind of raised beds for a while.
Now, the good thing is we're, at least we have aspirations to do park master plans at Robert Strange and Mates Park. So that could definitely be part of the community outreach, saying that the community like that community garden. And we can get that into the master plans, but we could be several years off from that.
I feel like Meads Park has beds that were put in from like a work on Wilmington project, right?
Have you ever interest in parking lot area? I'm not thinking this is something.
Yeah, right there. Because I remember I went that day when they opened it, and it was a work on Wilmington chamber project. I guess I don't know if there are flowers in there, I haven't been back since.
Um, Yeah, I mean, I think we want to continue this conversation. It's certainly been one of the recommended action items that came out of our previous task force that this committee was formed from, was looking at opportunities for this type of personnel. Next steps perhaps is, exploring potential funding opportunities and looking at what potential sites on the city might fit to build. So continuing discussion with Parks and Rec staff to see the next steps we might take.
And I would say that probably public sentiment has changed greatly in the 10 years since this was. There's been a lot more interest in bringing food to those deserts. And it's risen to a greater height in the community dialogue right now, because it certainly is true. I would say that Greensboro's efforts lots of ways help to encourage folks to do these things in their own backyard as well. So, that was a big part of it. You can go to bed and space these tables here and feed your family for quite a good period of the year. So I think that could be a part of this, just beyond we're going to provide you space. But there has to be an education component with it as well.
I'd be curious, the rec center ones that were like operated by the nonprofits, they were successful as well.
They were successful at that.
I would be interested in seeing if we have an abandoned lot somewhere on the north side of town, something like a fraternity, or an organization that could involve minimal funding from the city, but still there's an actual organization that's managing the site to manage composting and those kind of things. I think could also be successful if the city's open to letting them use that property. To me, that's kind of an intermediary step between a site on a park that's staffed by city employees and like a community garden that's run entirely by like a neighborhood association. Have that kind of in between where we have it's a city property, it's managed by a nonprofit organization, and it's still achieving our goal of providing local food to communities in need and compost site if that's possible. So I think maybe an additional next step would be not only looking at what parks, the staff parks would be a good candidate, but also if the city has any unused property that they would be willing to lend out to a nonprofit in one, food desert area.
I would want to like also seriously consider pairing it with like a community solar project.
Power for the site.
Yeah, well, and more. It'd also be a source of revenue for the site.
Can you find out if anyone actually applied for this?
I know, I was wondering, what happens? What happens when someone applies?
Good day.
Yeah, no one's ever done it, yeah.
Is there a way to look into that?
Yeah, I'll check with staff and see what their recollection of this is, where it went from here. I mean, we've got on our agenda here just a few sites that are in the community, and since we don't have any in our parks, my guess is that if we did get applicants, the city did our best to passively discourage the process just by the verbiage that's good. You need water, you need help, you need funding, you need all this other stuff that we can't provide.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to get some feedback from some of the community gardens as to if they applied, the
They just-
And why they didn't apply.
It's the reminder, crops cannot be grown for financial benefit of organization. Is that because they would be like an urban farm and like that would be not in code with zoning?
I think it's because they don't want a third party profiting off on city property, like.
Oh, I thought this was like just to have any kind of community garden in the city, even if it's not on city land.
No, this is just on city property.
This is just on city
Yeah.
property. Oh, okay.
And the plots that were rented in Greensboro, we didn't monitor or police that at all. You could grow what you wanted to grow and do with it what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
Now, the ones that were free, they could not profit off those at all. The ones that were managed by other outside groups, those are typically rec centers. So, outside of a staff site where they have water and power available.
I think it's a little profit off of it. Sounds like, oh, like some like giant commercial enterprise is gonna come and like farm out of it. But if these are low income residents and maybe growing some vegetables to sell for some money to pay the light bill, like I don't think that's profiting off of. I would reconsider that language. Like people, if they want to sell them, let them sell them. Why not?
A little bit more like a kids making it program, where they're learning skills, doing a lot of things, but they can also sell their stuff in the little store.
Yeah, I think it's like a little bit to like, oh, they should only have to eat it. Well, it's like, no, this is their labor and people need money in this world to do things. Would be something I would be interested in seeing change.
To be continued.
Well, if there's any way I can help, just let me know.
Yeah.
But I would encourage you to go to City of Greensboro's website and look at their community garden.
I was just on there. It's cool.
It's pretty nice. So, pretty impressive.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate it so much.
I'll dodge the rain and the heat.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
Back
Yeah,
to item two.
Yes, we can move on to the original item number 2 now, general updates and info. So I will pass that back to David to start with.
Yeah, I'll kick it off with just a few updates and upcoming stuff. First was just the Cash In on Clean Energy event that I attended back in July. It was put together by the Department of Energy, had a number of good speakers there, had somebody from the White House there speaking in regard to some of their policies. City of Charlotte Mayor had a few words to say at the start, but it was really focused on educating. It wasn't just local governments, there was nonprofits there, some private citizens, and they had different kind of focus groups that break down into after kind of the general presentations, but really about taking, educating about the various IRA funding opportunities. It's obviously focused on the local government ones. I think what I came away from the most was just in regard to some of not only the grant funds, but there's also opportunities to advantage of some of these IRA tax incentives, which are pretty impactful in regard to getting potential projects kind of penciled in to make financial sense. So you could not only apply and receive grants kind of on the front end, but to you could also apply for some of these IRA tax incentives. So for example, if you're wanting to put some solar on a rooftop, apply for some of the grants, and a number of them out there for, including like our CPG grant, we want to use some of those funds to put solar on a roof. You could do that, but also for the energy production that you achieve with that grant, you could apply for tax incentives. Well, so it would give you rebates based on how much energy you're using.
And for the local government, right, it would be direct pay now.
Yeah.
Did they say, because I heard like a scary rumor in the beginning, but I haven't looked at this since, did they say anything about like potential wait times for when that money would get paid back? Because I know at one point people were like, oh, it might be 2 years or something.
Yeah, they went into that a bit, and I think they're still developing guidance on that. But yeah, I mean, you talk about the direct pay, this is kind of the first time where tax exempt organizations like a local government can pay for these, or can apply for these tax incentives. So that hasn't ever been the case before, so kind of double dipping in a way with perhaps getting a grant to cover some of the installation costs, and then can also apply for these tax incentives to get money from what you're producing. Also, it also covers EV charging infrastructure, so as well as the purchase of vehicles. So,
Yep.
So I was this information has been out there previously, but before you kind of dive into the details, it's hard to get your head around it. It's potentially available. So yeah, that one kind of sheet kind of shows you the variety. I think which one is it? Page starts off with the businesses, and then it dives into the tax incentives. What page number is the tax exempt entities, section D, that shows all of the various types of programs that you can qualify for tax incentives for. So this is why it was a really good day for somebody from our finance department to participate in that event down there, because that's above my head as far as financial aspect of it before. But as we move forward with any of these potential renewable energy or fleet electrification projects, this could be a huge part of that as well. So it definitely speaks to some of the goals for making potential projects meet budget requirements. That was my big takeaway from that event. We also had a section on the North Carolina Green Bank Fund, which I know you're going to talk a little bit in regard to the overall program, but that was one of the areas that they discussed as well as that fine for that.
Greenhouse gas reduction, solar for all, yeah.
So they're going to be part of.
And the other ones inside of the greenhouse gas. Yeah,
So
yeah, I can.
We'll let you dive into that in a second, but yeah, that was another new development here in the state, that there's low interest or North Carolina Green Bank that's now available for looking at low interest financing for a lot of clean energy projects, especially for private sector and residential programs as well. So perhaps something for us to kind of really educate and put out for whatever means we can, and educate our citizens in regard to some of these benefits that are coming down the line that could go directly to them, as opposed to looking at some of our own city projects. Be a lot of opportunities for residents as well. Next, just some upcoming things. Going tomorrow and Wednesday for the North Carolina Sustainable Fleet Technology Conference in Raleigh. Now that we're part of the North Carolina Clean Fuels Coalition, for us to apply to be. somebody from the city to be up there to attend, represent the eastern part of the state here, so we have to see who else from the coalition is there as well, but um, there was something that came through my emails last week in regard to a bunch of new funding that's coming out as well for transportation projects. If you're a part of one of the Clean Cities coalition, so there's going to be some upcoming funding opportunities for fleet electrification efforts. So,
While you're up there, I have I guess it's an ask. I've identified a need for I'm curious if there's any organizations, whether it be nonprofit, governmental, corporate, that are providing like education to local government, to purchasing entities, for like fleet purchasing entities. A local school board here in the last month turned down $3.5 million in grant money for EV buses. Because of concerns with the functionality of the electric vehicle buses. And I'm curious if there's an organization that can provide them with accurate information, like that can prevent these travesties from happening in the future. So I'm just curious, as you're networking there and attending, I'm curious if there are any organizations that are providing like educational opportunities to fleet purchasing managers, to local government, to whoever.
I mean, I think the Clean Cities Coalition would be one of those. So
That Energy Foundation probably also is. I'm sure there's like a whole EV branch, but we're not involved in, but I can reach out to the group because is there a news article about that?
there is, and were they looking for education on it, or
It's part of the movement.
Staff members were. I don't know that the board was. Staff members were looking for ways to educate.
yeah, that's a lot of that funding would have probably paid for the installation of the charging
Would have-
infrastructure.
It would have replaced the entire fleet for one school, and Duke was going to grant them the infrastructure for free as well.
Duke was gonna add, yeah. I think that also just like to this point really emphasizes like just this like a need to continue to do like continual education of decision makers, even like well before you make an ask, and like find ways to like get in front of them and like with no ask, just like information only. I think it's really important because then it's almost too late when there's like a month before the agenda comes out and then people are like heated about it and no one's thinking clearly in that moment. So it's really important to lay the groundwork well before, especially when we start talking about these things and asking for money.
I wonder I don't know if it is something that you'd be interested in, David, and I think it would ultimately be your choice coming out of your department. But I wonder, to her point, if it would make sense to do like either biannually or like a quarterly, just like informational update from you to city council, and just like an email, like a newsletter or like a flyer or something that's just like, here's the latest and greatest in EV fleets, here's what's available in EV fleets now, or, here are a ton of tax credit incentives that are now becoming available to keep in mind on the city, as for the upcoming budget. Just to keep it in their heads again. So like when we go and say, hey, we need an electric garbage truck, they're not like, that's something that's, sure, when we get to Mars, we can talk about electric garbage trucks, so it keeps it more in the forefront and kind of puts the educational piece before the ask piece. Whether they engage with it or not, at least that way, you can't say we didn't try and, you can't say that there wasn't any information available to you on it. 3 months ago, I even sent you my quarterly update that had talked about these new EV fire trucks.
Yeah, yeah. Dave and I have certainly talked about opportunities to educate, just have learning sessions. For city leadership. Something we can lean into a bit harder. Sure.
Or even make it like just an open presentation to city staff, so you can get the people who are already interested and want to be advocates, kind of get them in, so that when that ask comes, more of city staff is prepared to say, yeah, that this is a recommendation that we support, or that, yeah, this is something that we should consider.
I did, yeah. It's like when we went to my husband's hometown over the summer over in Europe, it's like all the buses are electric. But this is like a well-known, people have done this before us, like not our
Yeah, we're
neighbors
not,
here.
yeah, we're not.
Yeah, we're not like breaking new ground
Right.
here. There are case studies that could be really like ample numbers of case studies that could be given to show people that they're reliable and fine. We're just behind. Yeah, I mean, and I know we've talked about it before, I don't know, like I would love for a city comms person to come to one of these meetings and like we could help them with some social media content, because I see them, like the city has a pretty good following on social media.
The city actually has a really good social media.
Yeah.
People person, and that might even, you could almost lead with, did you know, we might be eligible for this?
Yeah.
That can help. And the other thing is, I wonder if there's someone at the chamber who is paying attention to this stuff, because there's a real PR opportunity to be seen as a leader, and the Chamber of Commerce likes to be seen as leaders and winners. So
Natalie was on our advisory board.
yeah, I wonder how plugged in she is to all this IRA money though. I know
I talked with her at the endowment meeting about it because like I want to ask for a Solarize campaign. But I do think, and it's jobs like Cape Fear
It's
Solar,
jobs,
it's
yeah.
Cape Fear Solar, it's like all these companies, like this is such an underserved market that even if when the solar for all money falls from the sky, like I don't even know if we're gonna have to bring in like national companies, which is a bummer,
Right.
So I think there's a huge like jobs, like workforce development piece to it as well, which is obviously a
Right.
huge part of their strategic plan.
Yeah, so I think keeping them looped in and
Mm-hmm.
there's also there's a pay $5 now to get 20 later aspect to all of this, especially, with the renewables. Eventually, once you catch up with your capital costs, then it's free energy, right? At least in terms of, so there's a business case for a lot of these things,
Oh, yeah.
but you have to make a case.
You sure you want to still encourage people to come in person? This is what happens.
No, I really would like the comms people to come. I would even like, it'd be fun to like team up, this is like, I know, but that person who does the City of Wilmington satire account, who's hilarious. It'd be a really fun partnership. They're so like, just like also.
Is her
poke
name
fun at-
Erica?
I don't know who does it. I have no idea.
At one point, I was like, I think this is who it is, but
They're-
no one knows.
They're hilarious. They're so
It's
funny.
hilarious.
Oh, and it would be such a good, like, to poke fun at ourselves too, would be really fun.
Yeah, not to mention, talking about the direct pay stuff, but a lot of that stuff's gonna be available to residents as well, so.
Yeah.
Sure, not many residents, and then it's like, where do I go to apply for this stuff? So you get that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's a public service announcement.
Yeah.
Hey, you know there's free money waiting for you?
One meeting as well. Let's see, where was, so that was the Raleigh meeting start tomorrow, a little bit down the road in September, there's, Electrify the South Collaborative, Savannah, which is sponsored by SSDN and CE, the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
SACE, yeah.
SACE. Again, more opportunity for pass in regard to lead funding, so. Sending an application or register to go to that event. But yeah, I'll certainly provide updates for both of those events that down the road. So much information to wrap my head around for all of these things, so hopefully come away with some good on for us. And then just wanted to give a couple updates on some existing stuff that's we've already goes on the sustainable municipal building policy process. I know we've mentioned it a bit in the past, but we're going to be preventing initially an update on the policy to city manager. It's kind of this process we're going through before we actually get it to city council. So next month we'll call city manager to brief him on the policy, give him a review presentation on it, as well as the EMT present.
MT is after that.
So Tony Collin and EMT, and a agenda briefing on a Monday morning to city council, following any input that EMT or Tony may have. And then scheduling it for
I don't know what EMT is.
the executive.
It's our executive team.
Oh, okay, okay.
It's all the department director.
Oh, got it, okay.
So that's kind of the process that hopefully have a solution on the policy. It's a process. Any questions there? Update on the energy efficiency block grant, EECBG. Still our discussion, I guess, Tom, probably, with regard to potential projects that we've identified. Well, one being the fleet transition study. A big part of it, for a portion of the funding. We're voted on to pursue. So we'll be looking at some of those funds to study to be performed. We've also talked about a Solarize campaign. So part of that's identifying partnerships.
Yeah.
Discuss further.
A Solarize campaign that the city would just like help a neighborhood organize.
Well, not even just the neighborhood, but just kind of doing one regionally, with counties, maybe even
Like all local governments would organize to
Just-
buy together.
I mean, that's how they've done it up.
Yes.
Up in the triangle area.
Uh-huh.
I mean, not just looking at just, say, Wilmington, Hanson, it wouldn't really be, that really wouldn't incentivize a good solar developer to come in, because they're looking for volume in order to really drive that cost down.
Right, but I mean, like, would you do like, well, are you saying that this, like, it would be local governments looking to procure, offer their own buildings?
Not more for private sector, so not necessarily at all for local government,
Oh, okay.
but more for pushing it out. to
Uh-huh.
Local businesses and residential sector.
Yeah.
So, it wants some-
Yeah, and then send you the calculator.
So, yeah, that's the block grant. We've still got plenty of time to get in. Projects are, so. Yeah, what's the best use of those funds? What's gonna be most impactful? That's why. So we're asking things. It's a lot of work and partnerships and organizations together, but impactful area as opposed to just city operations.
That one's due in January.
How much would we
As far
cover?
as, you know, it's like your whole plan doesn't need to be.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
How much is that, the grant?
I think it's like 172.
Last on item number 2 is just, no, the city did make the purchase for, I'm calling it the new city quarter state, I mean, you said 929, but
What was formerly the PPD? I don't know if it's-
we're trying to not use the word PPE anymore. So we just, just kind of wanted to, you know, any initial questions about what the purchase means or.
But and during our planning call, Dave gave me a little bit of just a initial thought process on that this facility will likely be run differently than the rest of the city facilities, and that they will have their own building management company. And well, maybe you can provide just the little spiel you gave me on.
Yeah, so this is quite a different facility than we currently own and operate. Decision was made months and months ago about setting up a separate organization within the city to operate that facility. We are very close to deciding how much of that facility we're gonna, well, we know what's going into the facility. We don't know exactly which parts we are going to occupy, but those decisions are very soon to be made. The balance of that, 3 or 4 floors will be leased out. It's commercial to commercial entities. In fact, Thermo Fisher will be a tenant. I think for at least 2 years, for at least 2 years, and they'll occupy 2 of those floors. But
All commercial, no residential.
I'm sorry,
All commercial, no residential.
correct. So again, this is quite a different arrangement that we've ever had. So
Because you'll be landlords, basically.
I mean, we're landlords in other facilities, but nothing on
To the scale.
to the scale, or this is a very sophisticated, high-quality, Class A office space type building.
Oh, I've never been in there.
The tenants that we have are the Railroad Museum.
Right.
On that street, so.
Right.
Isn't Cape Fear Commercial gonna handle it?
There is I think they're looking for a firm to manage the tenant spaces in terms of
I think they just
recruiting.
passed that. last
They
meeting.
awarded that recently.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I've got a hearing problem going on right now, so
sorry,
I'm
no.
acting like I can't hear you. It's because I can't hear you. In addition to that, the city's gonna surplus it's either 5 or 6 buildings, including the one that we're in. This building, one diagonally across the street, the building right next door up Chestnut Street, and then at the corner of Fifth and Chestnut, we own the middle floor of that building. And then the Parks and Recreation staff that exists in the building at Greenfield Lake, right kind of adjacent to the tennis courts. That building will be surplus also, so.
Why surplus?
Why surplus?
Just gonna sell it. It means you're just gonna sell it, right?
Yeah, but at a discount, like not at market rate.
Well, there'll be a whole process.
Oh,
You know, we are governed by state legislature.
Right.
How we
Sell stuff.
surplus or
Yeah.
sell. There's different means and methods for doing
this,
this, but they will follow.
what they have to.
Right.
Yeah.
All that being said, the balance of, you know, in terms of our calculation of energy consumption, that we haven't figured that out yet.
Mm.
But obviously that'll come with time. Much sooner than later now, since we owned it and starting the process to occupy it.
Is there gonna be much renovation required? I mean, is it gonna be LEED certified if we do renovate? Is that factored in?
Yet to be determined.
So that would probably be our recommendation, right? We,
In
At
terms of,
least to the standards of LEED.
Maybe also have like an energy, like some sort of energy incentive for tenants or something too, like. For how much energy, I mean, like it's office space, it's not like it's industrial space, I'm sure no one's like running something insane, but I don't know, if anyone has like data storage or something like that, might be interesting to like think about setting energy goals for tenants also. I don't know what's allowed.
I'm very sure that we don't have that level of sophistication where they know energy per floor.
Oh,
It's one account,
oh, just one giant meter.
as far as I know. I'm not sure.
As far as I know.
Depending on the sizing of the building, the demand load of the building, you can talk to Duke about sub-metering.
Yeah.
Whether, you can sub-meter, it just depends on the size of the demand load of the building, on whether you will get it for free or whether you have to pay for it. But it's an option for you.
Yeah, still haven't seen an energy bill for yet. I'm not sure when we already switched over to a city account yet, but.
I would see if you can get the
Must be
previous
huge.
2 years from Duke.
you own it.
If the previous owner will allow that to be disclosed.
Yeah, we've already got that.
Okay. In that case, I'd say you can establish a baseline, and that can give you a good indicator
Nothing weird at
of
all about it.
what your cost is going to be. Because you can look at the 5 buildings planning on surplusing, you can calculate the energy usage intensity, EUI. It basically tells you how much you're using per square foot in these buildings, so it's an apples to apples comparison. You can look at those 5 buildings, what their EUI is, and then compare it to the EUI that you can calculate off the previous bills.
Sure.
At 929, and that'll give you an idea of like, okay, well, how much more energy intensive is this building than these other 5 we've been on? That can kind of give you an idea of, are we getting a more efficient building, a less efficient building? On a square foot basis, what is that gonna look like?
You're spot on. Maybe go back to the years that they had the building most occupied, because over the last couple of years,
true.
they have had a very minimal.
100% true. Yes.
So I think
Great point.
But
the last 2 years may give a slightly different view, if you actually have people in there.
Yeah, it'll be some sticker shock compared to the last 2 years when you
Correct.
guys started
Mhm.
turning all the lights on.
But I'm not sure the previous owner ever really had it fully staffed,
They
When-
got
when
up
was
to,
previous one?
60 or 70%.
it was designed for 2,000 people, and they got up just north of 1,500.
And how many city employees are gonna be over there?
They get departments, I don't know how many people, so planning.
Who's
code,
not gonna be over there? Parks?
Who's not,
Who's not gonna be over there?
do any sort of maintenance, you will not. You,
Still be at your building or?
nobody, well, the engineering department is the only department from my shop coming out here.
Well, I have a question.
Everything across the street, everything across this street.
Right.
Um,
They're even gonna have city council there too, aren't they?
Yeah, we will not use city hall. for
You're gonna
city
be up in the
Oh.
top, you're gonna be up in the top 2 floors or not? I think you are.
Good question.
Well, I'm waiting to hear. You don't know
Wait,
yet.
PJ said he has a question.
Oh.
Go ahead, PJ.
Are we gonna rebalance our energy savings, like our new baseline, when we dump these buildings? When I say dump, sell, whatever, to that new building? And try to at least make the former PPD building more efficient than it already is? I'm just trying to understand what's the process once all this move happens? What are our obligations?
We touched on that during our planning call, and I think in large part, the calculus remains unchanged because for us, because our directive is to transition to, 50 and 100% clean energy, and it doesn't stipulate based on current baseline numbers or, you know, for current operations. So, you know, I think in large part, you know, nothing changes for us as far as our mandate and our directive and how we go about it. You know, the numbers will change, but our goal is the same.
So so a new building gets bought and all of a sudden we meet our objective. Like it's just, I'm not saying it's not the right thing to partially claim victory, but I think we should still be looking at opportunities to improve that new facility.
Oh,
Yeah.
no, I read that as 100% accurate. I mean, we don't get to say that now we have clean energy because we're not using these buildings. No, I think we're trading 6 of one for a half dozen of the other. We still have that same goal of energy efficiency, reducing energy usage, clean energy for the building. And just because it's a different building, I think that nothing else changes.
With this new operations manager there, will that be more difficult to get things done?
He would know. My initial guess was yes. My educated industry opinion would be yes, because now you're adding another party.
So let me see if I understand. So there's gonna be a new facilities manager overseeing everything
Just that
over
building.
you? How's this gonna work?
It'll be a separate division or department that has its own budget and its own manager.
Managing what?
Just that building.
That campus.
The whole building?
I thought, isn't Cape Fear Commercial doing that?
They're leasing the unused spaces.
Ah,
But
gotcha.
they're gonna have to report to whoever this facilities, what's it gonna be called, do you know?
Yeah.
929 czar?
Well, everybody keeps calling it the PPD building. And I said, we gotta
929
we
something.
gotta start a new
Tell them-
path because it's
See
not.
if the
PPD.
929 czar can come to our meetings, or we can somehow connect with them.
But I think, I mean, I guess, of course, when we think about an operations manager, that's our concerns about energy efficiency of the building. The fact that the electricity comes from something that's a fossil fuel or clean energy is not at all related to the operations manager, or how we offset the usage of that building with other clean energy facilities in other city areas. So,
Well, to PJ's point in previous meetings that like the less energy we use there, the more a percentage point difference change affects it. So if we can, you know, if Duke starts generating 100 megawatts of clean energy and we use 150 megawatts, you know, that's X percent. If Duke generates 100 megawatts of clean energy and we use 125 megawatts, that's now a more significant portion of our energy consumption that we're making clean.
well, yeah, obviously, yeah.
So it doesn't change the approach, but it doesn't change the results. Because we're talking about percentages. Now what Duke generates, you know, it just changes because we're changing the amounts of what we're using, it will change the calculus of how much of that is provided by Duke. You know, like you said, when we have a policy shift, or if we source through a different type of clean energy and we're purchasing a certain amount of clean energy or generating a certain amount of clean energy, the more we can produce from that PPD building will get us closer to that target of 100%.
Right.
These are all good questions. I'm afraid some of the answers, we just don't have all the answers.
Right.
This is
No,
where,
well, and that's what this is initial questions.
I do, sorry, I just want to make sure we have time to talk about solar for all, because I have an ask that's timely.
Sure.
I'll talk with the other deputy city manager that's leading that project and kind of get a feel for when might be a time to kind of nudge into the process a little bit more.
Sounds good. Well, that's a good transition point to move to item number 3, Solar for All grant. We'll turn that over to you.
So the Solar for All grant is a portion of a giant piece of the Inflation Reduction Act. The Environmental Protection Agency is starting something called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Within that fund, there are 3 competitions and one of them is the Solar for All grant. And this grant is really important because it's focused on getting access to solar energy, whether like rooftop solar or community solar. It's focused and geared towards low-income communities and communities, like environmental justice communities that have been adversely impacted by fossil fuels in the past. So it's $7 billion that the EPA is going to give out in 60 different grants, make more or less. And so in my role at Vote Solar, we've been helping like a lot of people try to understand like how to apply for this money. And really, it seems like what the EPA wants is one application from each state. But how do you do that, and how do you make sure that everyone's talking to everyone? So at first we were unsure whether the state energy office was actually going to put in an application, because the state energy office is very new and they don't even have a spot on the website. And they have had a lot of staff turnover for various reasons. And the North Carolina Clean Energy Fund, in order to participate in the program, you need to show how you're going to leverage the money you get with a community development financial organization to like build a market. So you need to have a financing partner essentially. And the North Carolina Clean Energy Fund is like super, and that's its purpose, but it has no capital yet. So anyway, these conversations were going on. And then on the affordable housing side of things, there was a lot of concern that the state energy office was not doing proper outreach to affordable housing organizations or nonprofits or local governments, that people at the state energy office would have no idea how old the housing stock is and how much of it cannot support rooftop solar systems without upgrades. And so there is now, and like, what are we gonna do with community solar when Duke's policies for community solar are horrible, and there's no community solar in North Carolina in Duke territory. So anyway, what it's come to be, it's all kind of fleshed itself out. The state energy office did put in a notice of intent to apply. We're gonna find out today at 5, I guess, how many other applications are coming out of North Carolina, because today's the deadline for nonprofits. I know that there is another really big nonprofit application that's gonna be in this deadline. And then I heard that Groundswell, which is a community solar developer, is gonna be doing a regional application that would do community solar in all of the Southeast. So all of this is whatever. The point for us, I think, is that one, this is like super important that we get the word out to residents in Wilmington, and we start talking about, are there ways to help people get the upgrades they need before the money could come down the line? So like when we think about the energy efficiency block grant, like could we, with the endowment, could we start thinking of ways to support those upgrades to start happening already? Are there industry partners that we need to loop in and kind of get them ready, like by working with the chamber or something like that? And more importantly, when the applications are due at the end of September, and it would be super great if we could like write a letter of support from this committee for an application coming out of North Carolina, because EPA wants to see collaboration. They want to see like widespread, involvement and engagement, because otherwise, I mean, I think the state energy office is applying for $400 million. Like, there's no way that we're going to get this money out the door unless cities and counties really actively support the program and get the word out. So I would like to propose that we consider writing a letter of support. I don't know if it could come from us as a committee, or if like it would come from you, David, as your role, or the city council. But I'd be happy to I have a meeting tomorrow to find out more about the state's application, and I'd be happy to bring stuff back.
I think something like that, we would have to make the recommendation to city council. I don't think this is the same thing like we did with the letter with the House Bill.
Carbon plan.
Yeah, so if we make a recommendation, I think David can bring it to city council and the city would have to sign off on it. I don't think we have that authority in the charter to make comments.
Here's what I'm thinking, PJ. I'm thinking to get city council to not get skitters and to have them sign, if they just write a letter saying, we have a clean energy advisory committee in our community, and these are the thing, this is a thing that they focus on, so just, because if we're trying to explain, I'm sorry, I'm talking loud.
Yeah.
Hear me. If we're trying to signal to the EPA and to the state that, yes, there will be community coordination, we can be very neutral and just say, we exist, FYI, we're a community that has
We have goals.
volunteers, and we meet every month on this, and we're watching carefully. And if this money should come to pass, we will be ready partners to help Level. Just keep it really neutral, so Luke Waddell will sign it. 'Cause
I
he'll-
agree.
Okay.
I agree. I just don't know how we do it, right? That was what I was asking. I don't know if we have the authority to do something like that.
No, I don't think we do, and they would be upset with us, because it would sound
Yeah.
like we're endorsing something. But I think if we just have a letter saying from city council, we have a committee, by the way, so if,
What,
Yeah.
what are we supporting though, just,
Supporting like an application to come out of North Carolina, like supporting that someone in North, like the
the
state
en-
energy office, whoever the lead applicant is, and to be honest, like those negotiations, like, I don't know if the state energy office with all of its 3 staff people is the right applicant to lead this application, but there will be someone who leads this application. And it is in the best interest of North Carolina that we have a strong application that comes out of the state that has a lot of support and involvement. And I
we
think,
stand ready to
yeah,
participate in should these things materialize.
yeah, and I know, like, for example, in Georgia, like the city of Atlanta and the city of Savannah are taking Athens, like they're saying like, hey, we have goals, like because the money, some people are still trying to take the money away from the program. So we're trying to show that
Within
there's,
the E EPA.
within Congress. So everyone's trying to show that there's like widespread support, like from the business community, from local government,
What about your coalition, your North Carolina kind of coalition that you're a part of?
well, SSDN.
Yeah, we had our North Carolina Cities Initiative call last week, and State Energy Office was on that. Conversation, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's.
I mean, do you have to steer whoever's going to be applying? I mean, because you could support something that you then don't really know what it's.
I think all we're supporting is an award of the grant to the state.
Yes, like that some of this money comes from North Carolina for low-income communities that have traditionally not been able to access solar because there's, obstacles in financing mostly.
And I would stay away from it.
Yeah, like-
just reference the actual.
We have
grant.
goals,
Yeah.
we have
If
goals.
this, we support North Carolina getting this money, and we're here to help. If it,
Yeah.
we're not even, we're here to help, but we have it, we have an energy advisory committee, and we're paying attention and, that kind of thing. So it wouldn't be a controversial thing for city
Super
council
easy.
to sign. Or even just Mayor Sappa may be willing to just fire off a letter
Yeah,
and not go with city council.
Either way.
but I know they are gonna be looking for letters of support, so
Got it.
I just wanna kind of give a heads up, and it'd be nice if we could do something as a
When's
city.
your time? End of
The
season?
application is due on September 23rd.
What was it for? What's the Kira? Kara, that's her. She looking at this a bit as well. Should be one to discuss it with.
September 26th is the deadline.
That's the deadline for people.
The application.
applying,
So we just have the letter in before that.
Well, it will not come from city council with that deadline,
Yeah, maybe the mayor would be willing to just,
because we can't.
yeah.
I think the lesson learned from last time is that we need a bit more of a slow roll to get to them with what the information is. Your suggestion is noted, and I think that might work to do something.
Yes, I mean, no, so I think that's all you need. Yes,
Easier.
Yeah, something really,
Yeah.
I want to clarify, I just want to clarify, you were saying, that you had brought up using some of the EECBG money
Mhm.
towards like retrofitting through like providing the necessary repairs to houses and
Mhm.
stuff. That's separate from this, right? This is more just
So this money, let's say the state let's say they get $400 million. The guidelines of the grant say that only 20% of that money can be used towards upgrades on homes. And in some parts of the country, that's probably enough, but like in Eastern Carolina, that's probably not enough. Like most roofs due to storms, just housing stock and the way homes are passed down through the generations, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get rooftop solar systems on homeowners' roofs. And so I think there's a concern that what are we gonna do? How are we gonna finance that part of it? Since there's a strict percentage limit in the grant.
I'm 100% on board with writing a letter of support for the grant. I would be strongly opposed to utilizing the ECG money towards repairs of private residences.
Yeah, I don't think we were, I mean, we talked about a solarized campaign
Yeah.
before, but that wasn't.
I'm sure that would be eligible expense.
Right.
Well, that's what a solarized campaign.
Well, I don't know if it's paying for. I think it's paying for the.
Installation.
Installation, but is it, do those look at doing repairs to roofs and that kind of thing?
Well, no, I guess I wouldn't know what why you would be opposed to repairs, but not opposed to putting something on someone's roof.
Personally, I wouldn't vote for utilizing ECBG money for solar panels for private residences either.
Oh.
But I wouldn't be as opposed to that as I would be to a repair for the roof, unless there's some kind of, because we're using government, we're using tax dollars to upgrade people's homes. And
Yeah.
I don't.
Isn't that what the money's for? I think they have to be used for residential purposes.
The
Yeah.
CBG grant?
You can't use them.
No, solarized campaigns.
No, I know, but I think the energy efficiency block grant money is for residential purposes.
You can use it for putting it on municipal facilities.
Right, yeah. You could use it all to put it on
Yeah.
ours, yeah.
And to that point, that's what we've discussed up to now. It's like the transition study, the gym or rec center, solar installation, things like that. And I would support more in that thing than going towards supporting a community like a residential community program.
Well, that would have a bigger overall impact as opposed to, say we just put, solar on top of the city facility. You're only just impacting that one facility, as opposed to a solarized campaign, which is basically a bulk purchasing program, trying to get as wide a group
As many
of-
contracts as possible.
Yeah, because what it does is you hit certain tier levels of people signing up for the solarized campaign, saying, yeah, I want solar on my property, or on my roof. The more people you have signed up, better. You
Yeah,
get these
just
tier
go
levels,
scale,
and
yeah.
that drives down the
Cost.
kilowatt per hour for installation, so that's.
Well, I will say, I think that is, I guess, because I know we're coming, that is a separate thing than what we were talking about, the letter of support, which would not be directing them on how
How to
to
spend it,
design
yeah.
the
Just
program.
give us the money, not this is how.
It
we
would
want
just be like, we would
Gotcha.
love if money for
Sure.
this came to North Carolina.
Bring more clean energy into the state.
Yeah.
One
One
way
or
or another.
another, yeah.
Which
Yeah.
would, it's, indirectly helps us achieve our goal, because more clean energy hitting the grid.
Yep. The more Duke can lower demand, the less fossil fuels they have to build, in theory.
Okay, well, we're at 2:30, so, do you need a motion from us to support a letter from the mayor in this timeframe?
Yeah.
Or can you just make a recommendation on that?
I think it's an action.
It's an action? Okay.
Yeah, I
In
think
that case, if you want to make a motion to,
I would suggest not tying yourself to any one specific individual.
sure,
Just,
just a recommendation from the city.
The city.
Yeah, okay.
leave it more generic, that gives us a little bit more flexibility.
uh-huh,
So
okay.
if you want to make a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion, to ask that the city write a letter of support for an application from North Carolina for the Solar for All program.
I'll second that. So then we have to do roll call vote. We have people on Zoom. So Richard Smith votes aye.
Lindsay Halleck is yes.
Cap Coleman, yes.
Jessica Cannon, yes.
Phyllis Vincent, yes.
Sean Sullivan, yes.
On Zoom,
Andrea Bennett, yes.
PJ Klein, yes.
motion passes unanimously. Okay, in that case, I will go ahead and adjourn the meeting unless there's anything else, anyone? Good stuff. Thanks for your time, everyone. We'll see you next month.
Thank
Have a
you.
Good one.
Has rained, gotten sunny, rained again?
I
in
know.
Ohio?
A little bit of everything.
Did it rain?
It
Yeah,
did.
the rain,
Lord.
yeah.